This is the story of a big green steam engine, 3801, the pride of Newcastle and the pride of Australia. In the year of 43, 3801 was born. She pulled train loads of soldiers, many of them are gone. In a cloud of steam with a surge of power, the big wheels moved around. And the firebox blazed, the people praised that awe-inspiring sound. 3801, 3801. They said that she would never come back. 3801, 3801. But here she comes, a-steaming down the track. In the 50s she made history by barreling down the track from north to south. As the green Newcastle flyer, 3801 belched fire, and the driver had a big grin on his mouth. From Newcastle to Sydney town, 3801 let no one down. She set the record, and it stands today. 1 hour 58 or so. Man, I tell you, that's not slow. The fireman's shovel melted on the way. 3801, 3801. They said that she would never come back. 3801, 3801. Here she comes, a-steaming down the track. 3801 was in her prime when challenged by the longest line across the country, east to west she flew. The first train on the standard gauge, she pulled and didn't show her age. She steamed across the Nullarbor, it's true. Worker on that railway line smiled and said she's looking fine, and raised his hat to see the lady by. Then you said to a kangaroo, "Oh, but mate, it's time I flew. Watch out, 3801 is coming through." 3801, 3801. They said that she would never come back. 3801, 3801. Here she comes, a-steaming down the track. Time went by and experts said the age of steam is good and dead, and so they towed 3801 away. Let her rust and fall apart and almost broke her old crew's heart to see their pride fall into such decay. For 8 long years she rotted there, it seemed as if nobody cared a damn for all the things that she had done. Till some people who had missed her decided to assist her and let the kids today enjoy the fun. 3801, 3801.
The person mainly behind the restoration project was none other than David Hill himself, who at the time was Chief Executive of the State Rail Authority.
I think this was the impossible dream. I don't think anybody really expected us ever to be able to restore it and put it back on the tracks under steam.
David got a small committee together, a committee of enthusiastic people from historical societies, Powerhouse Museum, a railway representative, and having appointed that committee, David was really the catalyst. The railways couldn't have done this restoration.
And I well remember back in November 1982 when we went down to the rail transport, old inner firebox was totally useless and had to be replaced. Whilst we were wrestling with those problems, we had the good fortune to meet up with the Hunter Railway Training Company, and that really provided the key to this restoration task.
Well, it was this time that the Department of Industrial Relations came in, and they sent down to us, more by advice through that. Kevin was in the apprenticeship directorate, and Kevin came down and joined with the committee.
Trades courses for unemployed young people. However, by 1983, there were some hundreds of apprentices in the Hunter region alone who had their indentures suspended because there was no work for them. This company was asked to provide a continuation of the indentures for these young people. We provided a boiler shop and a machine shop, and then of course the interesting aspect,
whether they could do the job, whether we could entrust such a valuable locomotive to them. I thought for a few minutes and I said to Kevin Harper, and I remember this quite vividly, I said to Kevin, well, what if we give your apprentices the tender portion of the locomotive?
And by early 83, there was quite a number of firms that either closed their doors or had to curtail their activities, and a large number of apprentices were being asked to work in a very commercial fashion for little more than the dole. And in addition, they'd suffered the psychological trauma of being thrown out of work at a time when they thought that. So in looking around, I discovered 3801 standing up at Thirlmere, rusting away in the weather. It was a very impressive project.
He knows his engineering very well. He's a superb manager, thanks to Arthur Somerson.
Yes, when I was asked to join the restoration program as a production manager at Davis State, the tender walls were so rusty you could put your foot through. All the streamline, that is the clothing of the engine, was piled into the tender tank. We had to commence to strip every bit and every part of this engine, to inspect it, and eventually to decide whether to repair it or whether it had to be replaced. We then had quite a number of discussions. We had a search for another boiler. We found that other boilers that were available had a similar problem, and eventually it was agreed that we could attempt to set a procedure and weld up these cracks. We set up a procedure whereby we would grind out a section of the crack
I think they did a fantastic job on this locomotive, together with their supervisors. They'd never seen a locomotive before.
Time and restoring a locomotive like this really is labour intensive, and if we'd had to pay normal rates for this sort of work, it would have been a prohibitive cost.
The finishing date was set, the pressure was on. We had a very tight program and we stuck to it. We steam up again and we actually got the engine to move on that day.
This is mission impossible. 3.5 years ago, when I stood on the plate of this thing and we loco hauled it, because it couldn't go under its own power. Out of Enfield on its trip up here to the dockyard, I was standing with John Glastonbury and the other great supporters of this train from the Rail Transport Museum, and I said, this is madness, it cannot be done. And it's a credit. When I came up here a year and a half later, I thought restoring a locomotive like this was putting a couple of panels back on, and saw 2,000 bits of train over the dockyard. I was convinced it was crazy. And it's a credit to the persistence of the Rail Transport Museum, to the Railway Historical Society, and most important of all, hundreds of young men and women who restored this here in the Hundy Valley Training Company. And last but not least, it's a credit to all of the fellows in the State Rail Authority in the grand tradition of the Railway Foreign Order that made it possible.
Those days are gone, far from Sydney town. The black smoke roaring high across the Horse 3 Rivers to Newcastle on the fly, over the Great Divide, on the Central Western Run, on the Southern Line, right on time when 3801. Such a great escape, with steaming across the nation. All the crowds would gather around at every country station. On the standard gauge, westward to the sun, across to Perth and back again with 3801. On 3801. Days are gone. Trina's gone, but some remember well the big green flash she went by as such a tale to tell. Roaming round from town to town, always on the run. You stood the test, you were the best. 3801.
It has also enabled a part of our heritage to be retained and restored to full working order. As a project, I believe this restoration has been an enormous success and highlights the quality of work and training which can be achieved through the use of off-the-job training centres.
And what we're celebrating here today is not a static museum exhibit, but a locomotive alive, in steam, and back on the head of the train where it really belongs.
If it were possible for me to say what would I like to commemorate my departure with, it certainly would be 3801, the best locomotive in Australia, coming out again.
Let the kids today enjoy the fun. 3801, 3801. They said that she would never come back. 3801, 3801. But here she comes, a steaming down the track. 3801.